Now, the next season I'm going to talk about is what I'm going to be calling the Hollywood season also. Obviously, Formula 1 fans know about it, long before that. Obviously, some of you might have even been alive when the Formula 1 season actually happened. But obviously, everyone else in the world knows about it from, a big Hollywood movie that was made, obviously, a few years ago. And this season is 1976. Obviously, the movie was the 2013 blockbuster hit of Rush, obviously, which starred Niki Lauda and James Hunt, respectively. Obviously, it was a really great season, obviously, which happened back in 1976. Niki Lauda was world champion, obviously, the Austrian driver, obviously, really fierce, played by the book, straight-laced, obviously, driving for Ferrari. And then, obviously, you had the very radical James Hunt, obviously, driving for the British team, McLaren, obviously, just moving from the, unfortunately, dead team of Hesketh. Obviously, those two drivers, had met before in the lower, was obviously growing up in the past, obviously had a big rivalry. Headed into this season, obviously, they all thought Niki Lauda could obviously retain his world championship. Some people thought that James Hunt could get it, but obviously they all thought that it would go to the Austrian. Obviously, James Hunt would have to wait for another year. So obviously, we rolled into this race, and obviously Niki Lauda started out with a gun, really fast, but obviously getting some big hits from James Hunt. It really went Lauda Hunt in the world championship until we got to the Spanish Grand Prix. James Hunt won the race, but Niki Lauda actually protested alongside his Ferrari guys, saying that the car was obviously irregular and needed to be disqualified. It was put on hold, obviously, with James Hunt's win put on hold and then obviously being overturned a few races later. So, long story short, it became, advantage Lauda, but obviously Hunt was definitely on his tail. But a big gap, obviously, which was opened up by the guy in the scarlet red Ferrari. Rolled by at the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring on the 1st of August 1976, was actually my birthday, and Niki Lauda in race day actually protested the race beforehand. Obviously, the Nürburgring, obviously at this point, obviously was the very long 10-kilometre circuit. It was obviously the cars would just fly around there, obviously very little in terms of safety, and obviously very much different to what we've seen, in the modern day Nürburgring race, obviously the little 2-kilometre circuit outside the big one. Obviously it started to rain, obviously it was really treacherous, with obviously very little safety precautions in the way. And Niki Lauda actually in the press conference said that, the risk is just too big, I can't race, I want to protest the race. Obviously that was very much overturned, obviously the drivers wanted to race, obviously James Hunt in the movie, for example, said that he obviously then would retain he would win the world championship by default, or there wouldn't be enough points to catch him. So obviously the race then went on. Obviously James Hunt did definitely want to race. So obviously they all lined up with Niki Lauda obviously leading the race and James Hunt in a close second. He had a bad few pit stops, but then obviously was chasing the lead. Niki Lauda, obviously, as he was pushing to try and catch James Hunt, who had leapfrogged him in a pit stop, Niki Lauda unfortunately was kind of going past what he would normally say was safe, and obviously really hammering that car around the circuit before he unfortunately lost a bit of the internal car structure. I think it was some kind of wheel nut, and then obviously span into the barriers and obviously causing a fire in the car. Obviously a lack of safety equipment, especially according to now, obviously meant that he was obviously severely burnt in the car. His helmet flew off an impact, obviously, which meant that he had a severely burned face, obviously really fearing for his life. The race was black flagged, and then obviously Niki Lauda was taken to hospital. He missed the next 6 races, obviously, where James Hunt took every single win, obviously, while he was in hospital, obviously, making a recovery. And against, obviously, doctors, obviously, the advice that he'd been given, he obviously then decided to get back in the car. And in a few races' time, I think it was about 5 or 6 races after his incident, at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and then obviously decided to try and fight for the World Championship, which was still in his grasp. Hunt had taken the World Championship lead, but obviously Lauda was definitely very close behind. Obviously he went a few races after that. I think Lauda finished 4th in that race, obviously, which was an incredible feat from him after obviously having his accident. Again, the trader wins, going down to the wire a few races time, and obviously the last race was the 1976 Japanese Grand Prix at the Fuji Speedway. And obviously now that is a very remembered race because of, well, 1, the movie, 2, because of Lauda and Rush, obviously another British world champion against the Austrian world champion, obviously Budden British world champion against the reigning Austrian world champion, but also, and for the big reason obviously which stands now, is that was the very first race to be broadcasted worldwide. Now again, obviously around that time, I don't know how much news obviously spread around different countries. I imagine it did, obviously, especially in Britain and Austria and obviously places like Italy that it concerned. And obviously, as I say, that was the first race that was publicly televised. Now obviously they lined up on the grid. Obviously Niki Lauda was in pole position with James Hunt obviously in 2nd place, really gunning for that win. James Hunt had a possibility of winning the race. I think he had to finish in 5th place, Niki Lauda, obviously, I think he had to win the race. So, obviously, it was looking like Niki Lauda was obviously going to take the victory before he then pulled into the pits against Ferrari's, disbelief, and then obviously just got out of the car saying that it wasn't safe to race. Obviously, James Hunt then went to get 5th place, and obviously the position that he needed to get to, obviously, to win the World Championship, and obviously then took the 1976 World Championship. Obviously, Ferrari were kind of really shocked, when Niki Lauda took that decision. Nowadays, that would be very much frowned upon. I can imagine Sebastian Vettel getting to the point where he would almost be fired if he did that. But nevertheless, so Niki Lauda did that because obviously it was raining in Japan. Obviously, yes, he will have been, traumatized by his incident. And he just said it wasn't safe to race. So now that I've said that beforehand, if maybe Sebastian did say that, there would be a little bit of the leash would be loosened. But nevertheless, obviously, doing that in those days obviously was a bit more, accepted because, unfortunately, drivers were losing their lives. At the start of the movie as well, Niki Lauda said, I think if 2 of them die every 20 drivers every year. So, the risk was massive. You would be lining up there to very much risk your life. Obviously, these guys are in modern day Formula 1, but in those days, you were lining up thinking I could race and I could never come home. It was obviously a very scary day. So Niki Lauda obviously walked away with his life rather than the World Championship. Obviously to him and his wife, that obviously is more important. James Hunt became World Champion in 1976, then retired after that. Obviously Niki Lauda then went on to win another 2 World Championships before retiring, then come back into the sport, then retiring again. So obviously he left the 3M World Champion. Obviously he's still found in the paddock. James Hunt obviously unfortunately passed away around 10 years after his World Championship. But nevertheless, obviously a great season. As I've just said there, the biggest thing for Formula 1 fans obviously is the rivalry. Obviously Niki Lauda still around to tell the stories, and 1976 Japanese Grand Prix, the thrilling climax, was the first race to be broadcasted worldwide. So again, maybe, obviously nowadays it would have been, but that really changed Formula 1 now. How easy accessible it is to watch on the telly, and I'll say, yeah, that was the first race to be broadcasted. It was really amazing. Obviously 1976, one of probably the earliest and best Formula 1 seasons, and it was just absolutely amazing, made better by obviously Lauda and Hunt's rivalry. Then the next season I'm going to be talking about is the 1984 World Championship season, obviously, which was contested between the very old driver at this point, Austrian driver Niki Lauda, obviously, who was in his second phase in Formula 1, obviously a 3M World Champion from Austria, obviously driving for McLaren, the team of his ex-rival James Hunt, obviously who I've just mentioned, obviously back in the late 70s, and obviously young gun French driver Alain Prost, obviously, who had just entered the team, obviously gunning for his first World Championship. So obviously those 2 drivers won most of the season, obviously battling the Ferraris, but mainly running away in that McLaren. That obviously was the year before the carbon fibre chassis Monaco, obviously before they changed the name to the MP4. But it was still obviously a very formidable season. Obviously they went all the way through the wire, obviously winning most of the races. Half a point was awarded, which I think was the US Grand Prix midway through the season, obviously, which was cut short, obviously, which we have seen in modern day Formula 1. Even so, all the way obviously to the Portuguese Grand Prix, which was the last round of the 1984 World Championship at Estoril. Now obviously Niki Lauda and James Hunt obviously went on, but Alain Prost had a few mechanical failures and included one in this race, obviously, which denied him the win, and obviously then awarded the World Championship to Niki Lauda, obviously the last World Championship that he actually won. So obviously that became, Niki Lauda was a 3-time World Champion. Obviously he had won his 2 World Championships with Ferrari, obviously in his first phase, then obviously came back to a pretty successful, obviously, run. I think he came back in 1981, obviously a few, kind of okay years with McLaren, then obviously hit the nail on the head, battling with young gun Alain Prost, obviously denying him his first World Championship, and obviously getting 3 with Niki Lauda. So obviously that was a really good season from them. Obviously the Tag Heuer Honda power engine obviously was doing really well with McLaren. Obviously the year later they moved to V12 turbos, and obviously, as I say, the MP4 carbon monocoque chassis car, which obviously went on to achieve so much in the late 80s and early 90s in Formula 1. But obviously it's still a great season and really a progressive season for obviously Formula 1 in the Honda era. So the next season I'm going to be talking about is the 1988 World Championship season, which obviously to Formula 1 fans is absolutely massive. And if I just say these combination of letters and numbers, obviously it will basically jog everything in your memory to be like, that was one of the best seasons in Formula 1 I've ever seen. And that is 2 numbers, 2 letters, a number, a hyphen and a number, and that is the MP44. Now obviously that was the 1988 World Championship winning car by McLaren. Obviously that was designed by Ron Dennis, and obviously it was probably one of the best cars, if not the best Formula 1 car that's ever been built. Obviously that won 15 of the 16 Formula 1 races in that season. The only one that it didn't win was obviously one where it came actually second place, which was in the Italian Grand Prix, which obviously Austrian driver Gerhard Berger won in the Ferrari. So obviously I guess that was fine, because obviously that's Ferrari, that's Italy, that if Ferrari win there, that's fine. But as I say, it won 15 of the 16 races. Obviously, it was really, really special by them. Obviously, the two drivers at the helm was obviously Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. Obviously, Ayrton Senna was gunning for obviously his first World Championship. Alain Prost, I think at that point, was going for his third World Championship. And obviously, it ended with Ayrton Senna winning his first World Championship, which I believe was at the Japanese Grand Prix. Obviously, really special from him. Obviously, one of many Brazilian Grand Prix winners, including Emerson Fittipaldi. Obviously, in the past, obviously, as you know, Brazil has obviously a big heritage with Formula One, and he just added his name to that, obviously, which became one of the best seasons in Formula One. Obviously, one of the best for Ayrton Senna as well, because obviously he would go on to win another 2 World Championships from then, and obviously those two at McLaren, Alain and Ayrton, obviously, which would create a big storyline for Formula One. Not just how good they work together, but obviously how bad they work together, and obviously just different things like that. But obviously you'll have to see, later on, what happened with them. But obviously it was really special from there. 15 out of 16 races for that car, and obviously that is on really hallowed ground. I remember, a few years ago, I think it was in 1984, when the McLaren MP1 came out, which obviously was the first carbon fibre chassis monocoque. It really, revolutionised Formula One. Obviously became a really, really special kind of Formula One car, especially, involving F1 safety. And again, obviously, with the the evolution of the MP44 was just really special for them. Long story short, McLaren really nailed their cars. Obviously, probably until about the mid-90s, obviously, when you had Williams and people like Benetton coming in. But yes, the MP44 was really obviously one of the best. 15 out of 16 races. Ayrton Senna gets his first World Championship. Obviously, a driver that only entered Formula One back in 1984. Really special for them. And yeah, obviously, it really was one of the best seasons for McLaren. Obviously, though that era was really great for McLaren. It was also V12 turbocharged Honda power. And obviously, as I say, Honda now, they were good. Yes, Honda were good, obviously, back in the day for McLaren. A really special car, and obviously, it's still hallowed ground for drivers today. I was actually watching a documentary the other day made by UK Top Gear, which was where Lewis Hamilton took around the MP44, the 1988 winning Formula 1 car by Ayrton Senna. A really, really special, really hallowed car, and obviously that car really on its own made one of the best seasons in Formula 1, obviously alongside obviously the Rainmaster Ayrton Senna and obviously the Professor Alain Prost. 1988, yeah, as I say, one of the best seasons that we've ever seen. I will be honest with you guys, those era for McLaren were one of the best seasons in Formula 1, obviously, all the rundown, obviously, between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, and obviously, again, it was hard to pick another year between those two, but I've decided to go for 1989, so basically the season after 1988, obviously, sorry, I said that. Obviously, again, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna lined up in that McLaren MP45, really special car for them. Obviously, it went on to win, I think it was 12 of the 17 races in that Formula 1 season. Obviously, they had a lot more competition this year from obviously the Ferrari and the Williams that were coming through. Also a young Benetton, obviously a certain young Michael Schumacher was testing for Benetton, obviously back in that season, and it was really special for them. Obviously, Ayrton Senna was contesting the World Championship alongside Alain Prost, who obviously had Ayrton Senna had the lead, obviously going into the last few races. Obviously, an amazing US Grand Prix by Ayrton Senna at the start, and obviously an amazing season by Alain Prost obviously going through. Gerhard Berger won the penultimate race of the season, which meant that all the points went to the last race at the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. So if Alain Prost finished the race in first place, then obviously he would have become world champion. Other way around. If Alain Prost had just finished the race, he would have been world champion. If Ayrton Senna had to win the race, he would have been world champion. Now, obviously, Ayrton Senna, as a driver, obviously was very reckless and is going. Obviously, we all know one of his most famous things that he said is obviously, if you go for a gap if you no longer go for a gap that is there, you're not a racing driver. Now, obviously, that has kind of stood the test of time, especially obviously in his career of what gaps he's actually dove into. So obviously going into the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, obviously there was a lot of controversy around McLaren, especially how obviously those two got on obviously behind the car. Obviously what had turned into a great partnership beforehand, and obviously a world champion in Ayrton Senna, a few-time world champion in Alain Prost, was obviously getting quite bitter. And obviously in that race around the third way through the race distance, obviously they went in the Dunlop curve of obviously the Casino Chicane, of the Japanese Grand Prix, and obviously collided. Now obviously that is a very famous Murray Walker commentary, obviously where they crashed. Obviously Ayrton Senna's on the inside, Alain Prost is on the outside, and then obviously Ayrton Senna goes in the inside, really forcing Alain Prost to turn in. Obviously I was watching an interview with Martin Brundle, Again, obviously talking about Ayrton Senna, and he said, obviously, because Martin Brundle, British driver, obviously, who had raced against Ayrton Senna, obviously, for 11 years, obviously, from 1983 in junior racing, obviously, all the way to his death in 1994. And he was saying that Ayrton Senna, you know, he was a great driver, he wasn't dangerous, he wasn't reckless, but he would put you in a position where if you didn't, you know, like, he would put himself into the best position, but it would be a position where it wouldn't be good for you, and you know, if you didn't get out of that, you would be crashing. So it's either like, you know, Ayrton Senna's coming on the inside or whatever, he gets in front of you, you can either keep going or you will crash, or you can either back out of it. So really, he was a very reckless driver, and he actually knew how to kind of manipulate the drivers. So obviously, again, like, as I said, that, you know, he had tried that before, but obviously Alain Prost, you know, world champion, multiple world champion, obviously he was the professor, he knew the sport better than anyone, and he obviously committed to that corner. So did Ayrton. Alain tried to turn in. He turned in on Ayrton, obviously, because he was on the inside, and obviously they crashed into the chicane. Can't say that corner, that famous corner. And obviously at that point, obviously Alain Prost did get out of the car. He thought obviously the race was over. Ayrton Senna then went down an escape road, obviously, which is still visible in this corner, this year's Suzuka circuit. Obviously, track bends around, so you go into the pit lane, or you can just go straight down to the escape road, obviously, which every track has one, but you're not allowed to do that, you know, just on if you want to. They're really only designed there, obviously, for mechanical problems, or if you have to avoid a crash, but obviously, again, you have to go around these bollards. Ayrton Senna had no power, but he knew that he'd get the car, obviously, starting again, because there was no anti-stall, so obviously, as soon as the car went, you know, you had to try and start it again, and then he got a push from the stewards, obviously, went down the escape road, and finished the race. I think he finished the race on podium positions. Obviously, he thought he won the World Championship, or at least denied Alain Prost the World Championship. But again, because he was the professor, like I've just said, he goes up to the steward's office, he complains, he says that, you know, the regulations don't allow Ayrton Senna to finish the race, and then obviously Alain Prost is given the World Championship. Ayrton Senna obviously is severely punished. Obviously, he gets a punishment from the FIA of a 6-month ban from Formula 1 for his actions. Obviously, very harsh from that. Alain Prost, you know, does fiddle the system. It is good, obviously, his knowledge in Formula 1. But as I say, yeah, the main thing was obviously in the race, Ayrton Senna went in the inside because he knew he could take that corner. But obviously, Alain Prost was never going to back down. It just adds, you know, more spice to the fight of what obviously was one of the best Formula 1 rivalries of all time. Now, obviously, the next season, 1990, I haven't included that, but a definite honourable mention for that. Again, they won most of the race, obviously, in the MP46. Very much, you know, fast forward to exactly the same time as Japan 1989. Japan 1990, Ayrton Senna is basically going to win the World Championship. Alain Prost is going to win the race and obviously get close to that. Ayrton Senna goes on the inside, forces Alain to crash. They crash into turn 1. Ayrton wins the race, but as I just said there, obviously Ayrton just would do something like that. He would put you in a position where you would crash. But obviously, nevertheless, their rivalry was obviously one of the best. 88 and 89, you know, both double whammies. You know, the first one that's going to be included in the video, and yeah, just what an amazing season for those two. Now, the next season I'm going to be talking about is the 1996 Formula 1 World Championship season, obviously the year before I was born. So obviously, which was won by British driver Damon Hill, but obviously was a really good effort in that Williams car. Now, obviously, Damon Hill lined up alongside Canadian driver Jacques Villeneuve, obviously the son of the late Gilles Villeneuve, and obviously basically destroyed the Formula 1 season. Obviously, there was a few wins obviously that were halted in their season, obviously especially with Michael Schumacher, obviously who had just recently signed with Ferrari, obviously the 2 world time champion from Benetton, obviously a few years ago. Now, obviously, they really, as I say, did a really good job in that season, but it was mainly the battle between Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve which got obviously everyone talking. Now, they were a really formidable pair. That Williams car, you know, was really, really fast, obviously, especially with the regulation changes at that point, obviously dropping down to the V10 era. And it was obviously a really good season by those. Obviously, just adding to the tally of British world champions, obviously, Damon Hill takes the victory after a really hard battled Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Obviously, takes the world championship, you know, over Jacques Villeneuve and obviously Oliver Panis and Jean Alesi and Michael Schumacher, obviously drivers who were in contention in that year. Obviously, it was a really, really great feat from him. And then still on the topic of Williams, obviously it's not an honourable, it's like kind of an honourable mention. Obviously the year after, again, Jacques Villeneuve does exactly the same in that Williams. Obviously, we all know Williams nowadays are, you know, really struggling under the power. Obviously, they were good back in the early 2000s, but their real time to shine obviously was in the 90s, obviously separating the McLarens, the Ferraris and the Benettons, things like that. And really, that was probably the last great year for Williams, obviously. The double that they had, obviously, with Jacques and Damon Hill. So obviously that was a really good season from the Williams car, obviously winning most of the races in that year, obviously separating, as I've just said, McLarens that were sneaking up, and obviously the Ferraris of Michael. We have now entered the 21st century, and obviously the first year of Formula 1 in the 21st century was obviously the 2000 Formula 1 Grand Prix season. Obviously we lined up with Michael Schumacher, obviously a good driver in 1999, but the big one that we're all watching is obviously double world champion from Finland, Mika Häkkinen, obviously who lines up alongside David Coulthard in that Mercedes McLaren. Obviously Mercedes, new sponsorship, new engine supplier for McLaren, obviously really good after they had left Honda obviously a few years ago. So obviously really good from them. Now obviously McLaren were the drivers to watch. Obviously they started out with a big win in Australia and obviously pushing through the Formula 1 season. Now obviously Ferrari with Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello obviously really pushed back with a formidable drive from them. Obviously Ross Brawn, a new guy obviously who had just come from Benetton, obviously had just joined the team in that year. A really formidable drive in that car, obviously, which I think was the F1 2000. Obviously was really special from them, and obviously won most of the race, obviously with Michael Schumacher taking the victory over Mika Häkkinen and his teammate Rubens Barrichello with 108 points. Obviously some really, really great from him. Obviously we all know how fast Michael Schumacher was, and obviously he would go on, that was his third world championship, and obviously he would go on to achieve another 4, obviously, which made it 7 world championships and 5 in a row with obviously the Scuderia, obviously in the early 2000s. Obviously a great start to the 21st century, and obviously would open the floodgates to, as I say, some great racing in Ferrari in the coming years. Now the next season I think we need to talk about now is the 2005 Formula 1 season, obviously which lined up with Michael Schumacher. He had just won his 7th World Championship, obviously the most successful driver on paper at this point. Obviously he was near a 91 win, obviously which he has now retired on. And obviously all eyes turned obviously to him and his teammate Rubens Barrichello to what they could do in the Formula 1 season. And obviously they lined up, it was a really, really great start from them. But the big eyes were on quite a bit of a new team, obviously, which had only circulated in the last few years. And that obviously was a team called Renault, obviously from France. So the engine supplier had now come into Formula 1 and basically made a big statement in the last few years, obviously becoming a Formula 1 manufacturer, obviously based out of Enstone in the UK. So obviously they lined up with Giancarlo Fisichella and Fernando Alonso, obviously 2 young drivers. Fernando Alonso obviously had only been in Formula 1, I think it was since 2001. Now they took the first win, was obviously an amazing start, obviously a 1-2 win, and Giancarlo Fisichella obviously taking the win. Now basically they won the next 5 races and really halted Ferrari's championship run. Obviously they were pushing for 8, Michael Schumacher obviously was still pushing for 8 world championships. Obviously they were pushing, as I say, for all their constructors world championships. At that point they'd done all but one with Michael Schumacher, obviously in terms of constructors, and they were pushing obviously to win in 2005 as well. Now it was a great push from Fernando Alonso, which again took it down to the wire, obviously separating the Ferraris and a few hints by the McLaren, obviously Juan Pablo Montoya and Kimi Räikkönen, obviously 2 drivers who had obviously they had replaced completely obviously Mika and David, obviously David who had gone to obviously the new team of Red Bull at this point. Obviously they took the fight down to the Brazilian Grand Prix, obviously where Fernando Alonso drove a great drive and became the 2005 world champion, obviously, and also the youngest Formula 1 world champion, obviously, which wouldn't be broken, had stood in Formula 1 for over 30 years. Obviously that record has now obviously been broken many times with Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, and even could be broken very soon, obviously with all the new guys coming in, but they have got to push soon, because I think Sebastian Vettel was about 22 when he won his World Championships. Obviously it is not too far away, but it was a very good battle from them. Again, obviously Fernando Alonso, new guy obviously at Renault, but basically a team that just weren't at the standard of obviously of the McLarens, the Ferraris, or Ferrari, so obviously that was a really big shock for them. And obviously now Renault would obviously then go on to win the 2005 and 2006 season respectively with Fernando Alonso and obviously the constructors as well, and obviously still a push to be a good manufacturer in Formula 1. Obviously a bit of controversy in their career, and you can still find them on the grid today, obviously with their 2 drivers of Hülkenberg and Ricciardo. Now the next season I'm going to be talking about is the 2008 Formula 1 season. Now this was the first season by Lewis Hamilton. Obviously he is the guy on the grid at the moment, obviously, who is going for his 6th world championship in Formula 1. Do you know what, sometimes I even can't believe that I'm even saying Lewis is going for 6 at the moment, especially when you found that he's only entered Formula 1 12 years ago. Obviously he entered in the 2007 Formula 1 World Championship season. Now, obviously, in that year, that was really special because obviously he was battling Felipe Massa and Kimi Räikkönen at Ferrari. He was battling for the World Championship lead. Obviously, he'd already beaten Fernando Alonso, obviously, who was his teammate in that season, obviously, who was sacked at the end of the season with McLaren. Obviously, some controversy around the Spygate scandal. But Lewis Hamilton, nevertheless, was a young guy. I think he was about 21, 22 years old when he came into McLaren, and he was battling for the World Championship. But obviously, he lined up for his second season in Formula 1 with a really big gap, obviously, to get, obviously, battling with Ferraris and obviously the struggling Renaults. Now, obviously, he started in the first race with an amazing season, and obviously alongside that, his teammate, obviously, Finnish driver Heikki Kovalainen, really just demolished the Formula 1 season, obviously winning almost all of the races, obviously battling BMW Sauber, obviously, which won a few races, and also, obviously, the Ferrari drivers, obviously, the two retirements, obviously, of Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa. Very much like 2007, obviously they brought it down to the wire at the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix, where Hamilton had to finish in a position which I think was 5th place, which obviously we all know that Felipe Massa just had to win the race and he would have been world champion. Obviously Felipe Massa had been in Formula 1 for obviously over, I think it was 9 years at that point. Obviously home race of Brazil, obviously would have loved to lift the world championship at Sao Paulo, especially wearing the Ferrari emblem on his heart. So obviously he rolled into the race, obviously won the race, no problems for him, and obviously he took the checkered flag. About 40 seconds wait to find out if he was world champion. Obviously those 40 seconds apparently felt like an absolute lifetime. Obviously Lewis Hamilton was behind Timo Glock, obviously the German driver, obviously while he was going around in the treacherous conditions. Obviously many drivers were spinning out in those conditions. Obviously overtakes him in the final corner and then obviously wins the world championship. Obviously Ferrari thought that they had won, obviously with Felipe, and obviously McLaren then finally did. Obviously McLaren were disqualified from the Constructors World Championship, obviously after what had happened in the 2017, obviously with Fernando Alonso and the Spygate scandal. But nevertheless, they had won the World Championship. Obviously, Heikki comes in. I think it's in 3rd place in the World Drivers' Championship, and then obviously Lewis Hamilton takes the victory over Felipe Massa. So obviously he becomes a world champion. He becomes the youngest world champion. He becomes the youngest British world champion, which had served for 44 years. Obviously, which is Lewis Hamilton's number, coincidentally. And then obviously that would stand until Sebastian Vettel in 2010. So obviously a great year from him. And Lewis Hamilton, I mean, whatever you want to say about him now, guys, on the grid, he had an unbelievable start to his Formula 1 season. Obviously 2007, first season, he was battling for wins, round 3, round 4, round 5. Got his win in round 7 in Canada in bad weather. Obviously battling for the win against Räikkönen and Massa in 2007, and then obviously goes to win the World Championship in 2008. Was obviously really, really special. Now I think that one of the most thrilling and entertaining years that we've had in modern day Formula 1 has gone down to many people as the best season in modern day Formula 1, or at least since we turned into the 21st century, is 2012 Formula 1 season. Now this lined up to be a really big season. So Sebastian Vettel, obviously the young gun from Red Bull Racing, obviously he already became the youngest world champion and the youngest double world champion. Obviously it absolutely obliterated the 2011 Formula 1 season. I think it was winning 11 races in that season. Ferrari were getting close, so McLaren, but again no one really could catch Red Bull. And obviously Sebastian Vettel lined up as the 2-time world champion at Red Bull, obviously from Germany. And Red Bull were only, I think it was 7 years old at this time, so obviously a very big feat for them. Obviously Sebastian lined up wanting to get his 3rd. Obviously there was some big regulation changes including the way that the aerodynamical chassis was lined up. Obviously we saw a lot of step noses in Formula 1. After a big winter testing kicked off, obviously we all started in Australia. The McLarens were really lacking pace in winter tests, but they obviously all turned that around with a win by Jenson Button in Australia. And then starting from Jenson, we had 7 different winners in 7 different races. So obviously Fernando Alonso took the win in a very thrilling Malaysian Grand Prix in 2012. The race that was over 4 hours long, a bit like Canada in the previous year, and a race that was contested by Sauber driver Sergio Perez, again a young gun, obviously McLaren in 2013. He should have won the race, he could have won the race, he spun out unfortunately at the last corner, giving Fernando Alonso the race, but it was a great race by him. Obviously everyone else won the race, so I can't remember in every particular order, but Jenson won in Australia, Fernando won in Malaysia, then you had Sebastian Vettel, then you had Mark Webber in Monaco, Lewis Hamilton in Canada, but the big one was obviously Pastor Maldonado in Spain. Now obviously that was Williams' most recent win, and I think it was their first win for over 10 years. I think it was Juan Pablo Montoya in 2004 was their last win, so 8 years since the Spanish Grand Prix. A really big race from them. Obviously Lewis Hamilton got disqualified from qualifying because of a fuel irregularity. Obviously at that point you had to finish your in-lap obviously with the field that you had, which was kind of, meant that you couldn't go flat out on your most recent, obviously, flying lap. Anyway, so Lewis Hamilton got demoted. Pastor was already second place, obviously, good effort by him. And obviously he got promoted to pole position, obviously, when Lewis went to the back. Started the race really good from him, obviously, you are leading the race, but he had, obviously, Spain is a very open circuit. Fernando Alonso, obviously, was the home gun, obviously, from Spain, was really gunning for that win. Fernando Alonso jumped him a few times, but at the end, it deserved to be Pastor Maldonado's win. Obviously brilliant from him, obviously great from the Venezuelan, who we haven't seen in Formula 1 since 2014. Obviously a great effort by him, obviously great to see for Sir Frank Williams, which I think it was his birthday around that time of the race, so really great from him. Bruno Senna, I think he got a retirement, but obviously nevertheless a win for Williams was great, and I would say their most recent win, really great for them. Obviously they have won since 2010, which obviously is always great. And then obviously we rolled on, I think it was the European Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso, who finally broke the chain of 7 different winners. But obviously, as I say, an amazing start of the year. We've never seen anything like that for a good few years, and we haven't seen that, ever since. It's always been, 1 or 2 constructors, winning all the races so far. Really thrilling from them. After that, obviously became normal permutations. Fernando Alonso, Mark Webber, Sebastian Vettel, obviously taking the victories, with a few McLarens sprinkled in here and there. Obviously, Kimi Raikkonen, the guy who returned to Formula 1 even, obviously in 2011 with Lotus Renault, obviously a Ferrari World Champion. He took a few years out in 2009 to pursue Rallycross. Then obviously came back into the sport a few years later. Obviously Ferrari ex-World Champion, as I've just said, enters Lotus Renault alongside Romain Grosjean. He has a good season up to them, obviously getting some good consistent points. And then again, in his first season in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, when again it was all looking to be Lewis Hamilton's win, he retired. Sebastian Vettel's win, he got disqualified from qualifying, very much like Lewis Hamilton in Spain. Fernando Alonso was nowhere to be found. Again, that Ferrari was just lacking pace in that race. And then Kimi Raikkonen has to come through and take the victory. Obviously amazing from him, and that would stand to be his most recent win, and the one that when he went to Ferrari we were all thinking, oh my god, come on, win. And he finally broke the chain after 115 races at the US Grand Prix. I remember the US Grand Prix obviously because it was very recent, but I remember that when he won in Abu Dhabi, and then obviously in Australia the following year, and we were just thinking, how good you were then, and then you went so long in a drought. But yes, obviously then Kimi Raikkonen takes the win in Abu Dhabi. Lewis Hamilton then wins at the US Grand Prix in Austin, the first race that we actually returned properly to the United States, obviously since Indianapolis 2007, obviously a race that Lewis Hamilton did win at, so he was the most recent winner in Indianapolis, and then the first winner in Texas, so that was really great from him. Then obviously we rolled by Brazil, which obviously was the last race, the penultimate race of the season. Fernando Alonso, I think, had to finish on the podium, and Sebastian Vettel had to finish no lower than 5th. The cards were in Sebastian Vettel's favour, but Fernando Alonso could still take it from a car that, I never thought it was that bad, but, talking to Jordan and talking to quite a few people said that Ferrari car was really lacking pace. It wasn't up to the standard of Red Bull's car, and it got you thinking that, Fernando Alonso, it was to him in that season, it was all about the drive that he did. That was just absolutely fantastic what he did. More so than, as I say, what the Ferrari car could actually give him. And unfortunately what Felipe Massa could actually do in that car. So, that's food for thought really. That was really more, that wasn't a Ferrari season, that was a Fernando Alonso season. Obviously that was really great from him. Sebastian Vettel started the race and he collided with Bruno Senna on the third corner and spanned the car around with minimal damage, even though there was a little bit of damage to the rear side pod. Then he continued the race, obviously with a few bad pit stops as well. Really thrilling race, obviously, as the rain hit hard in Intergalos. Fernando Alonso did think he had it in the bag for a little bit, but obviously then when Paul Resta retired, bringing out the safety car, there was no overtaking. Sebastian Vettel finished in the position that he needed to. Fernando Alonso, I think it was third place that he finished, great position by him, but unfortunately he couldn't get the World Championship, and obviously, as I say, Sebastian Vettel becomes the youngest triple World Champion. Then obviously the year after he would become the youngest Wehrmacht Weltmeister. But 2012 was an absolutely incredible year, one of my favourites, one of Jordan's favourites, one of the best of modern day Formula 1. It's going to be hard to beat, for modern day drivers. Obviously, Lewis, your Valtteris, your Maxes, your Charles, look out, because I don't think that year is going to be beaten anytime soon. Now, the next season I'm going to talk about is one of the most recent seasons in Formula 1. Now, it's a 2016 Formula 1 season. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why have you got that one in? It was just dominated by one team. Obviously, that was Mercedes, but that's the reason why I'm going to include it in today, because obviously, we like it when a sole driver wins, even though most of the seasons we've talked about now is obviously being dominated by one team, shared by the teammates, which again, 2016 had been filled with controversy, which it had been, and obviously filled with, you know, inter-team crashing like we'd seen with McLaren back in the 90s. So it was a really, really good season to watch. Now, obviously, we went into the 2016 season. Lewis Hamilton, two-time world champion, at this point, obviously winning in 2008 with McLaren, 2014 with Mercedes, and obviously 2015 with Mercedes also. That makes him 3 world championships, Nico Rosberg, obviously at the team since 2010, he needed really to push, obviously, battling Lewis Hamilton since he came into the team in 2013. Some big battles from them already. Obviously, they collided at Spa, they collided at Monaco 2014. They had a few big run-ins, and obviously Lewis Hamilton had already declared that they weren't friends anymore. But obviously, this was the season that it would all boil down to. Nico Rosberg doing a really good start out with the gun, winning in Australia and the next 3 races, including the race that he'd already won in 2015. This would make it 7 in a row as we headed to the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, 2 big things happened in the Spanish Grand Prix. Mercedes crashed out. They crashed with each other. Obviously, Lewis went in the inside of Nico on turn 3 of the Spanish Grand Prix in Catalonia. Took both cars out. Obviously, a big shock for every fan. But obviously, the big thing was that what had happened at Red Bull. Now, obviously, it probably feels like we were talking about this yesterday because we were, which obviously was the train places incident, but obviously with Daniel Kvyat and Max Verstappen. So a week ago, Daniel Kvyat was then swapped in for Max, and we were all thinking, why has that happened? Danny was a fine driver. Max hasn't got any good credentials from Toro Rosso. Why is this happening? But I'll tell you something though, after the Sunday, we weren't thinking that at all. Because Max Verstappen, 18 years old, I mean, that's insane. That's you start university that year. It's ridiculous. He had won his first he'd won his first race in Formula 1, and not just that, he'd obviously won it in the first race after all the controversy, and of course, obviously when Mercedes crashed. All of those made Max's win obviously very, very special. I can almost guarantee you guys, on an unrelated note, that will never, ever, ever happen again. Max's record will stand probably for eternity, probably for the rest of your life and my life, and I don't think the controversy like what we saw in Train Place will ever happen again. But obviously, nonetheless, Max won in Spain. Daniel then won in Malaysia, which was obviously a race that Lewis Hamilton had an engine blowout, which basically a lot of people say was the end of Lewis Hamilton ships. Get me words so mixed up, guys. Sorry. Lewis Hamilton's, I forgot what I was saying, something ship. Anyway, Lewis Hamilton pushing for the World Championship. People were saying that was the end of that obviously he couldn't go for it anymore. Nico Rosberg obviously was well and truly leading the World Championship. Everything has swapped places from what it was a year ago in 2015. So obviously 2 wins by the Red Bulls. Every single win by the Mercedes, and every race bar one, I think that was 19 out of 20 races, Mercedes had podiumed at. Obviously, Nico Rosberg still taking the podium in Malaysia, obviously behind the 2 Red Bulls. Obviously, the fight went down to the wire at the season closer in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, a great race by that. Lewis Hamilton took the victory, but Nico Rosberg came second, obviously, with a bit of foul play from Lewis Hamilton, a bit of kind of chucking your toys out of the pram, watching his teammate win. Nico Rosberg took the World Championship victory for the first time in his career. Massive applause, obviously, from him, from his family, from the team. It had finally not gone Lewis's way, it had finally gone Nico's way. It was incredible. And then, a few weeks later, he announces his retirement from Formula 1. So obviously with all of that, through all of the problems obviously through the year, like McLaren obviously not having a very good year, 2 Red Bulls obviously battling with the Mercedes, Ferrari nowhere in sight, can I say, obviously Kimi nowhere, Sebastian filled with controversy, filled with crashes. Remember, he had his crash with Danny Kvyat a few times, obviously China and Russia at the start of the season. So with all that, 2 Red Bull wins, Mercedes domination, obviously, which would continue, but no season like 2016 just makes it more of an amazing season. So yes, the most modern season I'm going to include. Some people might not agree with this, but yes, it is one of the best seasons, I think, in Monday Formula 1. Not as good as 2012, obviously not as good as some of the best ones we've talked about, but definitely a big season to mention anyways. So obviously, guys, that is the end of the top 10 seasons in Formula 1. Obviously, I hope you really enjoyed the episode. Obviously, if you're new around here, please make sure to like and subscribe to the F1 Debate Show. Obviously, leave a comment about, do you agree, do you disagree about the season? Obviously, let me know if you have another favourite season that I haven't mentioned in this video. Obviously, I hope you can stay track with, obviously, our countdown to 1,000 videos. Obviously, all week is obviously our F1 1000 celebration video. Obviously, it should be a really special episode. Obviously, check out the preview show and obviously the other top 10 videos that we've made this week. obviously the preview show coming out tomorrow, the debate show coming out tomorrow, and then obviously the review show on Sunday. So obviously that is it from me, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Obviously, and until next time, guys, we'll see you later.